It all started with a leak in the ceiling. Not the most romantic setup, I know, but sometimes the weirdest stuff sets everything in motion. I was crashing at my friend Jonah's place for a week while my own apartment was getting fumigated. He had this big, slightly creaky house in the suburbs, complete with a sunken living room and a backyard grill he never used. The only catch was that his older brother Mason also lived there, temporarily according to Jonah. Temporarily, my ass. Mason had clearly been living in the basement for at least a year. He had his own mini fridge down there, a massive TV, even a beanbag that looked like it had been molded to his body. We barely talked that first night, just a muttered hey as I passed him on my way to the bathroom. He had that older brother energy, kind of quiet, slightly intimidating, and annoyingly hot. He worked construction or something physical, always came in with dust on his boots and that tired, worn-in way of moving that made you want to watch him stretch. I told myself to behave. I was a guest in their house after all, but that got harder when the leak started. It was in the ceiling of the guest room, my room. Water had started dripping onto the carpet right above the bed, and the only spare space available was, you guessed it, the basement. Jonah offered to crash with a friend for a couple of nights so I could have his room, but Mason waved him off. He can sleep downstairs. I don't care, he said, not even looking up from his phone. Are you sure? I asked, trying not to sound awkward. Mason just shrugged. It's a big couch. So that night, I carried my stuff downstairs, heart thudding a little too fast for something as simple as sharing a space. Mason's basement wasn't fancy. Just one big room with his bed in the corner, a couch facing the TV, and a thick rug that covered most of the cold floor. It smelled like cedar and laundry detergent. He didn't say much when I came in, just tossed me a blanket and said, "Let me know if the fan's too loud." That first night was uneventful. I slept on the couch, facing away from his bed, listening to the hum of his ceiling fan and the occasional creak of the house settling. But by the third night, something started to shift. We were watching some dumb action movie together on the couch, half a pizza between us, when he nudged my leg with his foot. "You always this quiet?" I looked over. His face was lit by the blue glow of the TV, and he had that half smile, like he already knew I was overthinking everything. "Only around hot older guys in basements," I said before I could stop myself. He raised an eyebrow. "That's so?" I tried to laugh it off. But he didn't. He just kept looking at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. "I don't mind it," he said. "The quiet." The rest of the movie passed in a blur. When he finally stood to stretch and turn off the lights, he didn't say anything else. Just gave me a look as he walked past, the kind of look that lingered longer than it should have. I lay awake that night, the blanket pulled up to my chest, heart racing like I was 16 again. And then I heard it, his bed creaking. Not in a gross way, just a shift, a movement. And then quietly, "You still awake? You still awake?" His voice was low, barely more than a murmur over the hum of the fan. I froze, unsure if I should answer or pretend to be asleep. But then I rolled onto my back and said, "Yeah." A pause. "You mind if I ask you something?" Mason asked. I propped myself up on one elbow, peering through the dark toward the shadowy lump that was his bed. "Go for it." "Back when you said that thing about hot older guys," he trailed off. "Oh, that," I swallowed. "Yeah?" He shifted again, the mattress creaking lightly under his weight. "Were you serious?" I hesitated. It wasn't like I hadn't thought about it since. A million times, in fact. But hearing him ask, his voice not mocking or laughing, just genuinely curious, made the air in the basement feel even heavier. "Yeah," I said, trying to sound casual. "I was." More silence. And then, "Okay. Okay," I repeated. "I was just wondering," he said. "You know, 'cause I don't really have people say stuff like that to me. Not seriously, anyway." I sat all the way up now, the blanket sliding down to my waist. "You're kidding," he let out a short laugh. "You'd be surprised. Most people just see a guy in a flannel shirt who fixes drywall. They don't really notice anything else." "Well, I noticed," I said, and immediately felt how lame that sounded. But Mason didn't seem to mind. In fact, he got up. Just like that. No warning, no drama. The bed creaked, the fan whirred, and a second later, he was standing at the edge of the couch. I could barely see his face in the dark, but the way he stood there, arms crossed, feet bare on the rug, it sent a shiver up my spine. "You ever actually done anything with a guy?" he asked, voice still quiet, almost thoughtful. "Yeah," I said honestly. "Not a ton, but enough." He nodded slowly. "Cool. You?" There was a pause, and then, "Not really." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Mason ran a hand through his hair. "I've thought about it. Just never had the space to, try anything without it becoming a thing." "Is this..." I started, then stopped. He looked at me, eyes shadowed but steady. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but it doesn't feel bad." He sat down on the edge of the couch, not close, but not far either. I could feel the weight of him in the cushions, could smell his soap, something clean and sharp like pine. "You nervous?" I asked. He smiled, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Little bit." "Me too." Another pause. Then, slowly, carefully, Mason reached out and touched my wrist. Just his fingertips. Barely anything. But everything buzzed. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he said. "I don't." So he didn't. He didn't rush it. Mason's hand lingered on my wrist, his fingers brushing the inside where the skin was more sensitive. The basement was dead quiet, save for the low hum of the fan and the occasional creak from the old pipes. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel it in the way my breath caught when his thumb grazed over my pulse. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, but my voice came out too soft, too breathy. He gave a tiny nod, then let his hand fall away. For a second, I thought he'd changed his mind, but then he shifted, turning to face me more directly. His knees were close to mine now, the only thing between us, the thin blanket draped over my legs. "This is new for me," Mason said, voice low and even. "I know." "Doesn't feel wrong, though," I swallowed. "It doesn't." He studied me for a second longer, and then leaned in, just enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. He stopped inches away from my face like he was giving me a chance to back out. I didn't. I closed the distance. The kiss wasn't dramatic or rushed, it was careful, curious. Mason tasted faintly of beer and something else, maybe toothpaste, and he kissed like someone who paid attention. His hand came up, tentative at first, then firmer, cupping my jaw. I leaned into him without thinking, letting the blanket fall away from my chest. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke right away. Mason sat back a little, his hand still warm on my shoulder. "Okay," he said quietly. "That was not what I expected." "In a good way?" "Yeah," he said, lips curving just a little. "In a good way." I leaned against the arm of the couch, heart still pounding. "So, what happens now?" he shrugged. "I guess that depends. You still staying down here?" "Unless you kick me out." "I'm not kicking you out." We sat in silence for a moment, just watching each other, the air between us lighter than it had been in days. Mason rubbed the back of his neck. "You wanna, just watch something? Like, take it slow?" I smiled. "Yeah, slow's good." He picked up the remote and flipped through the options, eventually settling on some old sitcom rerun. It was something easy, mindless, with laugh tracks and cheesy dialogue. We didn't talk much after that. He sat next to me this time, not across the room, and sometime around the second episode, I felt his hand find mine under the blanket. He didn't make a big deal of it, just laced our fingers together like it was something he'd done 100 times before. And in that quiet, half-lit basement, with a stupid sitcom playing and our hands intertwined, I felt something shift. It wasn't about figuring everything out all at once. It was about knowing, finally, that maybe this, whatever it was, had the chance to be something real. The next morning was weird, in that totally normal, absolutely not normal way. I woke up first, curled up on the couch under a too-thin blanket. My neck hurt, my lower back hurt, but mostly what I felt was this hum in my chest that hadn't been there the day before. Mason's bed was empty. The basement door was half open, and I could hear faint sounds from the kitchen. Pans clinking, the low murmur of someone moving around upstairs. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. The memory of last night came rushing back in fragments. His hand in mine, the kiss, the heat of his body when he leaned in close, and then the quiet afterward. We hadn't talked much. He'd watched 2 more episodes with me, his thumb brushing lightly across my knuckles, like he didn't even realize he was doing it. When the last one ended, he'd stood up, stretched, and just said, "Night." No kiss goodbye, no second look, but it hadn't felt dismissive, just cautious. Still, part of me wondered if it had been a one-night thing. A curious moment that would disappear by sunrise. I padded upstairs, bracing for awkwardness. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and saw him barefoot, in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, flipping eggs like it was the most natural thing in the world. He didn't flinch when he saw me, just nodded and said, "There's coffee." "Thanks," I mumbled, moving toward the pot like it was a lifeline. He plated some eggs, toast, and turkey bacon, slid it across the counter to me, then leaned back against the sink, arms folded. "You sleep okay?" "Yeah," I said. "You?" He nodded. Once I passed out. There was a beat of silence as I took a bite of toast. Then he said, "So, about last night." My stomach tightened. "Look," I said quickly, "if you feel weird about it, or if you were just experimenting, or—" "No," he interrupted, shaking his head. "It's not that. I don't feel weird. I don't know what I'm doing." I looked at him, really looked at him. The guy who seemed unshakable, who barely flinched when the water heater burst last week, or when Jonah spilled marinara all over the couch. And here he was, visibly nervous, chewing his bottom lip like it might help him get the words out. "I'm not going to pretend I've got it all figured out either," I said. "But we don't have to rush anything." Mason let out a slow breath. "Cool. I just didn't want you thinking it didn't mean anything." I smiled, warmth blooming in my chest. "I didn't." He looked relieved. We ate quietly after that, the silence easy this time, filled with the soft clink of forks and the faint sound of birds outside the window. After breakfast, Mason offered to drive me to my place to check on the fumigation situation. On the way, we talked about everything except last night. Work, traffic, the neighbor's weird lawn gnome collection. But every time we hit a red light, he'd glance over at me. Quick, unreadable looks like he was checking to make sure I was still there. Still real. When we pulled up to my apartment, I hesitated. "Want to come up?" I asked. He hesitated too, then nodded. Yeah. My apartment still smelled faintly of chemicals, like lemon-scented poison. I cracked a few windows and turned on the fan while Mason stepped inside, glancing around like he was trying to see the version of me that existed here, not just the guy who slept on his basement couch. It felt strange having him in my space, like he'd crossed some invisible line between the world of him and Jonah and this quieter part of me that nobody really saw. "You've got plants," he said, surprised. I laughed. "Yeah, crazy, right? They're alive and everything." He leaned in to inspect one by the windowsill, brushing a fingertip along the edge of a leaf. "I don't know what I expected. Something messier? I'll take that as a compliment." He turned, hands in his pockets. "It is. Kinda." I sat on the arm of the couch, watching him scan the room like he was searching for something else to comment on. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was charged, but not tense. Like we both knew there was more to talk about, but neither of us wanted to push too hard. "So," I said finally, "this whole thing, you still okay with it?" Mason nodded. "Yeah, it's just a little new. I've never really let myself think this way before." "You don't have to define anything," I said. "We can just see where it goes." He exhaled, relieved. "Good, because I don't want to screw this up." "You're not." He stepped closer. Not quickly, just a few slow steps until he was standing in front of me. Then, with one hand still in his pocket, He reached out with the other and touched the side of my neck, his fingers warm, thumb brushing the spot just under my jaw. "Last night," he said, "that kiss, I've been thinking about it all morning." "Same." He leaned in again, slower this time, like he was asking a silent question. I answered it by meeting him halfway. The kiss was deeper this time, not exploratory, intentional. His hand slipped around to the back of my neck, holding me there like he didn't want to let go. I felt his other hand move to my waist, steady and sure. My fingers found the hem of his shirt, tugged just slightly, and he didn't stop me. We broke apart only when we had to, both of us breathing a little harder, our foreheads almost touching. "I don't think I want to go back to the basement tonight," he murmured. I swallowed. "Then don't." His eyes searched mine, and whatever he saw there made something in his posture relax. He kissed me again, softer this time, slower. And then we were moving. Not rushed. Just this gradual, wordless dance as I backed us toward my bedroom. His fingers laced through mine. The bed creaked under our weight as we sank onto it, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could exhale completely. No questions, no definitions. Just the warmth of his body against mine, the way he looked at me like he didn't want the moment to end. And for once, neither did I. We didn't rush it. That's what surprised me most. Even in the quiet of my room, with the door shut and the outside world pushed far away, there was no urgency in how Mason touched me. He moved like someone who had been waiting to feel safe, like someone who wasn't sure he ever would. And now that he did, he wanted to savor every second. We lay side by side on my bed, fully clothed but close enough that I could feel his heartbeat through the fabric of his shirt. His hand rested on my chest, thumb tracing slow, aimless lines that made my skin hum beneath the surface. "You're really not freaked out?" he asked quietly, not looking at me. I turned to him. "No." "Are you?" He paused. "No, I thought I would be, but I'm not." I let the silence settle between us, then said, "You know you don't have to figure it all out today, right? You don't owe anyone a label. Not even me." Mason looked over at me, eyes soft. "I know, I just didn't expect to feel this clear about it." "Clear how?" He rolled onto his side, propped his head on one hand. "Like, this feels more honest than most of the shit I've ever done." That landed heavy, not in a bad way, just real. Like I was finally getting the part of him that wasn't buried under years of trying to be someone else's version of normal. "I've had girlfriends," he said after a moment. "Dated casually, had fun, whatever. But it always felt like I was waiting for something to click. Like I was borrowing someone else's shoes and pretending they fit. And now?" He looked at me for a long beat. "Now I think I might have been walking barefoot this whole time and just didn't realize it." That made me laugh, which made him laugh, and the tension, what little was left, melted. We didn't do much else that afternoon. Just laid there, tangled in conversation and drowsy warmth. At one point, I drifted off for a bit, waking to find Mason still next to me, one hand behind his head, the other resting lightly on my hip like he didn't even notice he'd reached for me. It was only when the sun started to dip that he stirred and said, "I should probably check in with Jonah. He's probably wondering why I haven't come home." I winced. Right. That might be a thing. Mason sat up, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, about that. I don't think I want to keep this a secret." I blinked. "Really?" He looked down at me, a half smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "What's the point of doing something that feels right if I have to lie about it?" I didn't have an answer for that, so I just nodded. He stood, stretched, and grabbed his hoodie off the floor. "I'll text you later," he said. "You better." And then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the ghost of his warmth still lingering on my skin. I didn't know what was coming next, but for once, I wasn't afraid to find out. It didn't take long for things to shift, for everything to start feeling like ours instead of just mine. Mason texted that night. A short, "Home safe," Talked to Jonah. Wasn't a disaster. I stared at the screen for a good 10 seconds before responding. Me. You told him? Mason. Not everything, just that I'm seeing someone. He asked if it was serious. I said it might be. Me. Might be? Mason. Okay. It is. That was how it started. Quiet honesty over text. Shared glances when Jonah wasn't looking. The kind of tension that was no longer about fear, but about anticipation. We didn't fall into a relationship overnight. It wasn't some huge moment with fireworks and declarations. It was more like a series of small, quiet acknowledgments. Nights when Mason stayed over without question. Mornings when we argued over who made better coffee. Weekends when he'd sit on my balcony with his boots off, watching the world go by like he belonged there. And, honestly, he did. The best part, it wasn't perfect. We had our awkward moments. Like the first time we ran into one of his coworkers while grabbing takeout, and Mason froze for a beat too long before saying, "This is, Nate, my, roommate's friend." I teased him about that for a full week. But then, the next time, he introduced me differently. "This is Nate," he said, simple and steady. "He's someone important to me," and that made up for everything. One night, maybe 2 months in, we ended up back in the basement. Just for nostalgia. Jonah was hosting a little get-together upstairs, and we both wanted some space. Mason pulled the old blanket over us as we lay on the couch, the TV playing something neither of us were watching. He looked over and said, "You remember the first time you slept down here?" I laughed. "You mean when I thought you were gonna kill me with awkward silence?" "Yeah," he said, grinning. "And then I kissed you instead." "Bold move. Best one I ever made." I looked at him, really looked, and realized how far we'd come. From vague glances and unsaid things to a place where it felt safe to feel all of it. The attraction, the care, the future that didn't seem so blurry anymore. "You still want to take it slow?" I asked. Mason slid his arm around me, pulling me in. "Nah," he murmured. "I want to take it seriously." And that was it. Not dramatic, not rushed. Just real. Two guys who met in a basement and ended up building something that felt like home.